So good morning and welcome. Today is Thursday, December 2nd, and it's 9:03 a.m. I am Ann Friend, the agency rules coordinator, and co-facilitating with me today is Shannon Ball, the paid family and medical leave insurance program policy lead. Thank you everyone for attending this RAC meeting for the Batch 2 PFMLI rules. This meeting is being recorded and will be retained as part of the official record. Further introductions will be done shortly, but first we have to go over some general information for everybody. Everybody's muted except for RAC members and OED staff. In the Zoom platform, the purpose of the chat feature is for technology issues only, and the purpose of the Q&A feature is to capture comments and questions. Please indicate in the Q&A section if you want to speak at the end during the public comment section if we have time. We will take comments in the order they appear in the Q&A section of this Zoom meeting, and we will unmute your microphone at that time. You're also welcome to send your comments to oed_rules@employ.oregon.gov, and then we will make sure that they get to the program staff. This RAC will be reviewing the proposed administrative draft rules and batches as the PFMLI program develops them and prepares for formal public rulemaking process. We're scheduled for a 9 to 11:30 meeting today, and we'll take a break about halfway through, give or take a little bit. If you need to step away, please make sure your microphone is muted. Today is the first of the 2 RAC meetings for batch 2, and the second RAC meeting will be on December 7th at 9 a.m., where we will continue having discussion and gathering your guys' feedback. Today, we would like to do an overview mostly of the proposed administrative rules. RAC meetings are advertised and open to the public. The purpose of the RAC meeting is to hear from RAC members and the stakeholders they represent prior to formal rulemaking. This meeting, again, is open to the public, but the primary purpose is to have discussions with RAC members and get feedback on the proposed rules and the statements of need and fiscal impact for the formal rulemaking process. After all feedback is reviewed by the PFMLI staff and changes made if and where appropriate, we will move this second batch of rules onto the formal public process for rulemaking. For public attendees that are listening, we welcome you to listen to the committee's discussion. If you have questions regarding this batch of rules, please submit your questions in the Q&A section. For questions not related to these rules, please send them to oed_rules@employ.oregon.gov. If we have time at the end of the meeting, we will take public comments. Today, we will not be addressing any batch 1 administrative rule comments, UI or PUA benefit questions, only batch 2 for PFMLI. Okay, let's do some introductions. The PFMLI Advisory Committee is the RAC for this and future batches of the administrative rules. RAC members, if you could please turn on your cameras and then unmute your microphone and begin introducing yourselves. Jenny, if you would like to start, that would be great.
Yes, thank you. Hi, good morning. My name is Jenny Dressler, and I work at Public Affairs Council. I am the small business representative on the Rules Advisory Committee, representing several small business entities or organizations, including the Oregon Farm Bureau Federation, Associated Oregon Hazelnut Industries, and the Oregon State Chamber of Commerce. Thank you.
It's good to have you here, Jenny. Paloma?
Yeah, I'm Paloma Sparks with Oregon Business and Industry. We're the state's largest and most comprehensive business association, representing over 1,600 businesses. I also was heavily involved in the negotiation and development of the PFMLI law, and I sit on the advisory committee.
Thank you, Paloma. Eric?
Good morning. I'm Eric Hunter. I'm the CEO of Care Oregon, Medicaid managed care company here in the state. Also do Medicare and some in-home primary care. We have over 1,100 employees across the state at all levels of of skill sets and education. But we also serve a good number of people in the Oregon Health Plan, many of whom have sort of lower paying jobs and have really an interest in making sure they're taken care of in this area. So looking forward to the work.
Nice. Well, thank you for being here. Andrea?
Hi, good morning. Andrea Peluso. I'm the Executive Director of Family Forward Oregon, and we're an organization that organizes mothers and caregivers to fight for supports for caregiving. And we led the coalition to pass the paid family and medical leave law and helped with negotiating. And I also sit on the advisory committee.
Thank you, Andrea. And I think the last person that we have is Amanda.
Good morning, and sorry, I'm in transit. So Amanda Dalton, I'm the president of the Northwest Grocery Association, and my firm also represents several small and large employer clients. I was also involved in the negotiation in 2019 and have been on the RAC for 2 years.
Great. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. We all really appreciate you guys and all the effort that you've put into this, endeavor to better Oregonians' lives. So thank you for attending. Okay, policy leads and staff are Shannon Ball on screen, Andrew, Warren, Jen Haynes, Rick Heineken, Matt DeRosa, and Dean Johnson is running the Zoom platform for us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon so we can begin the fun, exciting discussions.
Good morning. First, we're just going to go a high-level summary again of how we're doing administrative rules for paid family medical leave. So we have a total of 5 rule batches planned over the next several months. And just on the screen here is a tentative timeline for the rules in each of the batches to become final. So batch 1 rules that consisted of 35 administrative rules relating to contributions, self-employed election, employer size assistant grants, and our outreach rule. We are currently in the formal public comment period, which is open until December 20th at 5 p.m. for these batch 1 rules. If you'd like to provide verbal feedback on the batch 1 rules, our next public hearing is next Thursday, December 9th from 4 to 6 p.m. There is a link to register for the next public hearing on our website and is also at the end of this PowerPoint presentation. Our goal is to have the batch 1 administrative rules become final sometime in January of 2022. The batch 2 rules is what we're here to discuss today, which relate to equivalent plans and 1 rule on definitions about wages. And we plan to have these rules become final in April of 2022. Then batch 3 rules will consist of rules related to benefits and tribal governments and should become final sometime in July of 2022. Batch 4 will be rules that relate to appeals process, and they'll become final sometime in August of 2022. And then batch 5 will be our miscellaneous rules that we identify we need, or any rules previously filed that we need to clean up or consolidate. And those rules should become final sometime in September of 2022. The compilation of batch 2 rules, we emailed the rulemaking advisory committee members, and we also have posted it on our paid family medical leave website. All of them have rule numbers, except I noticed the first one, the wage definition rule, did not have a rule number. So we will be fixing that prior to the filing with the Secretary of State. And I'll give the rule number today just to have for reference. Prior to this meeting, we previously had some equivalent plan draft rules in batch 1, and we received a lot of very good input, and we tried to incorporate that feedback into our compilation that we sent you guys in batch 2. I'll try and mention the input we incorporated as we review each rule, but for those of you that are participating today who provided input already, please feel free to share your suggestions, comments, or concerns here today as well if I didn't capture that or state that correctly. So we're going to move on to the next slide. And we are just going to start talking about the batch 2 rules, unless there's any questions before we get started. All right. So we split up the batch 2 rules into 2 topics. So the first one is the wage definitions and then equivalent plans. So I'm going to take time today to walk through each section of the administrative rules and explain more about each draft rule. We'll also provide opportunity for the RAC members to discuss the rules within that topic today, or you can just listen and absorb the discussion. And then between today and the RAC meeting next Tuesday on December 7th, you can take time to think about the draft rules and provide discussion at the next RAC meeting. We're open to anything for these 2 meetings of how you guys want it to work. We'll have 11 rules that we're going to go through today. So moving on to to start about the first rule then. So this rule is just a rule on definition of wages. This rule includes batch one administrative rules included 10 draft rules that described how wages were treated with paid family and medical leave purposes. Those rules had the same meaning given in the unemployment insurance administrative rules for defining wages. Some of the terms within those rules needed to be further defined. So that's why we have this rule drafted today to help define those terms. So I'm not going to walk through every definition within this rule, but I'm just going to touch bases on a few of the definitions that you'll find within this draft rule. And like I said previously, on the compilation, the rule number was not included. So the rule number is 471-070-0400, which this puts that rule right before the 10 draft rules that are describing the wages, because those administrative rules are 471-070-0415 through 0465. And again, those are in batch one on our website right now. So just going through this on the screen, the first definition that we have is agricultural labor. And it is used in the draft rule currently in batch one titled wages remuneration other than cash, which is 471-070-0450. And we looked at several different definitions for agricultural labor, and we ultimately landed on this definition, which is similar to what Bureau of Labor and Industries uses for agricultural labor definition. Any questions, comments on that before I move on?
I have a question. So at the top of this section here, it looks like, I mean, we're trying to define wages based off of UI. So how is this definition different than that which is used in UI?
Good point. So I believe UI, if I remember, I'm going back, remember correctly, I believe UI didn't define agricultural labor in theirs. And so we were just defining it to align more with BOLI.
And maybe we'll talk about it next week, kind of as we dive in a little bit. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shannon, I had a comment too, which is, I know Linda couldn't be here, but I think Pacoon's preference is for a definition more like the IRS's.
Okay.
So I'm happy to forward that along for review.
Yeah, that would be great, Andrea. Okay, then scrolling down, going down to section 3 of the administrative rule for domestic services. It also used in this domestic services also used in the batch 1 rules titled wages remuneration other than cash again. This definition is similar to what's included in statute under the Domestic Workers Protection Act under ORS 653-547 and in the UI administrative rule 471-031-0130. Questions on that? Specifically the Workers Protection Act under 653-547 statute, that is the ones that define domestic service further of what is not included, like the A through continuing on further. So just some information there. Okay, then scrolling down, go down to number 6, which is holiday. So if you look at ORS 187010, you'll notice it only right now goes to J. However, during the 2020 legislative session, House Bill 2168 changed the statute to include Juneteenth, sorry. So we're also including that in the holiday definition. And so that's why it goes to K here. And that's just a summary of, there's other definitions within this administrative rule, but those are just a couple that I wanted to touch on today. Do you have any other questions about the definitions that are included in this rule right now? Or comments? All right. So we're going to go back to the slides then, and we'll go over the statement of need for definitions related to contribution wages. Just a little history on the purpose of the statement of need is for the need and fiscal impact. Is for the agency to explain the fiscal and small business impact for those administrative rules. Remember, this isn't impacts that were caused by the statute, but rather was caused by the administrative rule that we just wrote. You can see from this information when the administrative rules are posted in the Secretary of State Bulletin, that's where you can find our statement of needs. In your packet of information that was emailed to you for this meeting and on our paid family medical leave website, you can see the 2 draft statement of needs. I'm just going to go over this document today and welcome your verbal comments. Or if you want to submit written comments also, I would love those. And if you can send those to us by next Wednesday, December 8th, that would be greatly appreciated. So the first statement of need is for definitions related to contributions, wages, the rule that we just talked about. So on the screen, Dean has up the statement of need, but also, it's also in your packet if you'd like to follow along, and again on our website. So the first section, if we scroll down a little bit to the top of page 2, is the racial equity impact section. House Bill 2993 was enacted by the 2021 legislation, and the bill requires the state agencies to include a racial equity impact analysis in its statement of need for all rulemaking. This requirement takes effect January 1st, 2022, but the Employment Department has chosen to implement this aspect of rulemaking early with the adoption of the Paid Family Medical Leave Administrative Rules. Therefore, you'll notice that we added a section to the statement of need and fiscal impact pertaining to racial equity impacts. Keep in mind that many of the impacts from implementation of the Paid Family Medical Leave program are a direct result of the legislation itself rather than the individual rules. In order to evaluate the racial equity impacts, we have chosen to address these 2 questions, which you can see on the screen. So the first question is, what are the racial equity impacts of this particular rule, policy, or decision, and who will benefit from or be burdened? And then the second question, are there strategies to mitigate the unintended consequences? So if we just scroll up just a little bit, Dean, yeah, right there. You can see what we wrote in our analysis that we did. It's our first attempt at identifying racial equity impacts and capturing mitigation strategies of unintended consequences. The Paid Family and Medical Leave Division is aware that the definition of agriculture, labor, and domestic services could disproportionately fall on Black, Indigenous, Latino, Latina, or Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islander, and other people of color-owned businesses. And we're working with our technology vendor to ensure that the registration process for businesses is accessible and is available in multiple languages, as well as having a paper process and staff ready to assist in the reporting and ongoing requirements. We're putting information and mechanisms in place to ensure accountability and mitigate disparities. We'll be creating frequently asked questions, video instructions, guides that will help address the Oregon Combined Payroll Reporting process specifically for agriculture and domestic service employers, and make those materials available in multiple languages. Any questions, thoughts, comments on the racial equity impact before I continue on in the statement of need? Feedback, anything? All right, if we just scroll down to the bottom or the top of page 3 is where the fiscal and economic impact section begins. We don't feel the administrative rule has a fiscal or economic impact, but again, would love discussion with you guys if you feel differently. Again, this is just the one rule that we talked about on the definitions one previously. The small business impact or the cost of compliance section that begins on page 3 is where we talk about the impact of state agencies and small businesses. Again, we feel that the impact on state agencies, local governments, and other public bodies is all created by the statute, requiring them to withhold from the employee's wages the paid family and medical leave contributions, and not from the administrative rule. The section for the effect on small businesses. Oregon has approximately 126,000 small businesses with fewer than 50 employees and 120,000 with businesses with fewer than 25 employees. Since all employees are eligible for the paid family medical leave benefits, all small employers will be subject to the administrative rules on paid family medical leave wages definitions. There's no effect on reporting or record keeping requirements, and no equipment or supplies is known due to this administrative rule. And then go ahead.
Shannon,
Yeah.
Paloma, I mean, having it so these definitions differ from the UI definitions, I would say that I think there would be an impact on record keeping because there will be a difference between how the two are calculated.
Thanks, Paloma. Good point. All right, moving on to the documents relied upon. So to help with this administrative rule, here are just a few documents that we relied upon: the Paid Family and Medical Leave Statute, the Domestic Worker Protection Act in ORS Chapter 653, House Bill 2168 during the 2021 legislative session, and the Bureau of Labor and Industries administrative rules. Again, please share. We would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Paloma, I have that written down, but if you want to put it in writing also, just send it to me by the 8th of December. Then we can incorporate your suggestions before we send it to the Secretary of State for the formal rulemaking process. Other comments, questions, concerns with the statement of need before we go on to the next section of rules? All right. Then Dean, if you want to move back to the PowerPoint, thank you. So this next section is about equivalent plans. We're just going to dive into all aspects of equivalent plans. We have 10 different draft administrative rules in this section, and we recognize we may still need a few more administrative rules related to equivalent plans, but this should cover a lot of them. Before we get started on going through the administrative rules, I'm just going to do a quick summary of what is required in statute for equivalent plans. So ORS 657B 210 through 657B 260 establishes that an employer may apply to the department to offer an equivalent plan for paid family and medical leave benefits for its employees instead of participating in the paid family medical leave state plan. The equivalent plan must be made available to all employees who have been employed by the employer for 30 days. The plan must be equal to or greater than the plan offered by the state. When applying for an equivalent plan with the department can charge an application fee of up to $250 to assist with the cost of processing. The employer of an equivalent plan can choose to have the employee pay part of the contributions, but the employee cannot pay more than 60%. The employee contributions received by the employer must be used for plan expenses and be in a separate fund and can't be used for any other purposes. So that's just a little summary, high-level summary of what the statute says in a nutshell. And so now we're just going to go through the administrative rules, which again were in your compilation that were emailed to you that begin on page 3 is the equivalent plans. And we're just going to start with the first one, which is definitions. So in summary, this rule contains several definitions that relate to equivalent plans. An employer can have 2 types of equivalent plans. First off, they can have an employer administered equivalent plan, meaning the employers offer a private plan and assume all financial risks associated with the benefits and administration of the equivalent plan. Or second, there can be a fully insured equivalent plan. And what this means is basically the employer purchases an insurance policy from an established insurance company, and the benefits related to the plan are administered through the insurance policy. The equivalent plan is a plan that is approved by the department that is equal or greater to than the state plan. The rule also goes into define what successor and interest that was referred later in another rule. And the rule also defines a substantial reduction in personnel by stating that the number of employees employed by the predecessor is reduced by at least 33%. And successor and interest is used in another rule, or substantial reduction in personnel is used in another rule as well. So that is a really high level summary of the definitions that are included in equivalent plan. I'm just going to pause there and see if there's any comments, questions, concerns.
This is Paloma. There's a question in the chat that I think is helpful and we should flag. Is about self-insured equivalent plans, but where they are administered by a TPA. I do think that's a gap that needs to be addressed.
Thank you for calling attention to that, Paloma. I have marked it to be answered during the public comment section. But
I just thought since we were in this section, I'd flag
yeah,
it.
however Shannon wants to do it, if she wants to answer it now and then we mark it as answered, I'm good with that too.
I haven't been following the chat, so I have no clue what it says.
Okay, so the Q&A is from Abigail. Is that the one that you're talking about, Paloma?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it says, you do not contemplate self-insured equivalent plans administered by the TPA. I would like to comment and question this gap.
Okay. TPA, third party administrator, I'm assuming.
Yep.
Okay.
I am going to have to turn to Andrew on that one. Would that be considered, they're self-insured, but they're administered through a third-party administrator, would that we consider those fully insured, or?
That is something that we are looking at currently. So we will be able to provide more detail and information on that aspect. I appreciate the question. That has come up a couple times. So we will address that and get an answer back to folks.
Thanks, Andrew.
Shannon, this is Jennifer. I would just add that would not be a fully insured equivalent plan. That would be a self-insured, and you would just be hiring the third-party administrator to administer it. So that would be a little bit different. We didn't really feel a need to put that in the definitions because it may not have an effect on the rules below, but it's certainly something that we will keep in mind and have thought about.
That is a good distinction. Thank you, Jen.
Thanks.
So
Thanks,
Abigail follows up with, I have a concern about 471-070-2230. The insurer or TPA may not have the ORPFML wages for all employees. They will only have it for the ones who file claims. Perhaps headcount would be available from bills, but the insurer and TPA will not have them current at all times. Okay, so if you want to address that, go ahead, and then I would encourage us to keep moving and save Abigail for the public comment period so that Abigail can articulate her words instead of me trying to read them and infer what she's saying.
I agree. We'll call on Abigail during the public comment period.
Okay.
But if any of the RAC members want to discuss any of it right now, that one, I'm open for that.
Yeah, we just had similar comments,
Okay.
but we need a lot more clarity around self-insurance and a set of rules around that, and some specificity around the need to show that you have set aside adequate funds to fund benefits if you're self-insured. So clarifying again what sort of equal or better to means in that context for the plan to qualify.
Okay.
Thanks.
Paloma, were you going to say something?
Most of my comments are in the next section that we're getting to. So.
Okay.
All right, then we'll just move on to the next one, which is application requirements and effective date. So before an employer can offer an equivalent plan to its employees, they first must submit an application to the department and have the application approved. The department won't review an incomplete application. The application must include the employer information, a copy of the equivalent plan, and attestation that the equivalent plan meets all the requirements. A $250 fee is due at the time the application is submitted with every new application, reapproval application with substantive amendments to the equivalent plan that the department already approved, and the $250 is also due if the equivalent plan is amended between or after the required approval or reapproval. $150 fee is due at the time the application is submitted with every reapproval with non-substantive amendments. And there are 3 required approvals, 1 each year for the first 3 years. There's no fee due if the application is updated or amended due to legislative changes. Based on your guys' previous feedback, the rule goes on to define what substantive amendments are. So substantive amendments is a change from a fully insured plan to an employer administered plan, and any other amendments that are non-substantive amendments. Remember that the first 3 years, an equivalent plan has to be reapproved by the department. The equivalent plan becomes effective on the first day of the calendar quarter following the approval date. So if Dean will pull up back this PowerPoint presentation, we'll up here on the screen is a summary of the equivalent plan fee structure that is explained in the rule, but in a table format that's hopefully lays out a little clearer. So the first year, the application fee will be $250, but each year after that and the next 3 years, the fee will be $150 unless there are substantive changes like switching insurance policies or changing from a fully insured to an employer administered or vice versa. There's no fee if there is non-substantive changes in between the annual reapprovals or after the 3-year reapproval process is complete. Just going on to slide 10. This goes into a little more detail. What is non-substantive changes? So for example, changing business or contact information, changing a policy number or effective dates from a fully insured equivalent plan. Those are all non-substantive changes. Notice there's some minor changes that doesn't change. Notice basically these are minor changes that don't change the actual equivalent plan. They're just changing like the name or policy number. The business can make non-substantive changes anytime without a fee or only have to pay $150 at the yearly reapproval process instead of $250. And then just moving to slide 11, this just further explains some substantive changes which require the $250 fee. So changing the type of the equivalent plan, going from a fully insured to employer administered or vice versa, that's one example of the $250 fee. If you stay with the same insurance company, but you switch to a different plan, we consider that a substantive change. Changing attestation on the equivalent plan and changing other provisions are just some of the examples that we would consider substantive changes. So that's a lot, and really briefly about the application process and the effective date. Questions, comments on this? Paloma, I think you said you had some.
I have one on something you just said in the slides. I think we need to explain what it means if you stay with the same insurer, but you have a different plan. I think there could be, you could be expanding the plan benefits. I don't know that would, or expanding who's covered. And I think I'd want more clarity around what it means to change the plan in a way that you all would consider substantive, that would require a new fee.
Yeah, basically, if they are, if the business is changing the plan, so if they change the structure or anything like that, then that would be considered a substantive change. And so your example was saying if they change the fee amount, I mean, that would be a substantive change in our mind.
So I guess, what do you mean by change the structure?
Example that they used to pay 20% of the employee's portion, and now they're paying the employees having to pay more or something along those lines. When the structure changes of the breakout and the split, that type of information. Andrew or Jen, can you think of other examples?
I think if we could be more specific here,
Okay.
It would be helpful about sort of what we mean when we say if you're staying with the same insurer but changing the structure. I think we just need more specificity.
Okay. And we can try and come up with some examples to have further discussion on Tuesday too at the RAC meeting.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Paloma. We'll think about that some more. There may be some scenarios we didn't think of, and we would really appreciate your help with that. What we're kind of looking at is whether it's going to take a lot more time to review. Are we going to have to go through and actually review it again to make sure everything is equal to or greater? How much is that going to cost in terms of time and money and that kind of thing in terms of substantive? But yes, I do think that we appreciate any scenarios that we may not have imagined or thought of. Thanks.
Good point, Jen. Other thoughts, comments?
My thoughts will just be on this actual rule language. So when we're ready to that.
Perfect. So I'm going to have Dean jump back to the rule compilation, and we're going to go to the next one, which is plan requirements. So this rule makes clear the requirements the equivalent plan must have for the department to approve. So based on previous feedback on the administrative rule, we expanded this rule to include exactly what the plan must cover provide. So for example, they need to cover all employees, full-time, part-time, or replacement workers. You can't just choose some employees to offer the equivalent plan to. The leave and benefits have to be equal to or greater than the state plan benefits. And they have to make a reasonable effort to make the first benefit payments to the employee within 2 weeks after receiving the claim or the start of the leave, whichever is later. We also added to the rule that the equivalent plan employer must provide in writing the reason or reasons for the denial or partial denial of coverage and benefits, provided along with their appeal rights to the employee. There are time limits for appeal, so it doesn't go on forever within this administrative rule. So that was some additions that we added based on feedback and suggestions from when this rule was in batch 1. Comments, thoughts?
Yeah, just appreciate some of the shifts, including the reference to employee contributions that are supporting the equivalent plan need to be directed toward that purpose, and some of those points of clarity.
Thanks, Andrea. All right, moving on then to the next rule, which is the reporting requirements. So quarterly, the equivalent plan employer must file the Oregon quarterly combined tax report detailing the paid family and medical leave wages. They don't need to pay the employer and employee paid family and medical leave contributions to the department. The department still needs to know the wage amount for each employee. Then annually, within 30 days of the anniversary of the effective date of the equivalent plan, they need to report to the department aggregate information on benefit claims and plan expenses from the prior year. That's just a summary of the reporting requirements in this administrative rule.
I'm not clear why the department would need the administrative costs of the plan.
Yeah, so the thought part of it is if there is termination, like termination or withdrawal later, then the excess funds need to be sent to the department. And so that is the administrative cost to determine, here's how much was collected, how much was the cost to administer it, that type of information.
I think that would be more properly than in the withdrawal section, not in the sort of regular, you need to have this information all the time. Because, whatever the administrative costs are, that's just on the business on what the administrative costs are.
Thanks, Paloma.
Shannon, I wondered from the version of this that we looked at in August to this, there's the removal of, I think, a lot of references to reporting on individual employees and their use of leave or need for leave. And I wondered what the thinking was around sort of how within equivalent plans, the agency will be able to kind of monitor that they're accessible, they're being used, employees have access to them when they need them, where there are, undue denials, that's something that can be flagged. Just wondering sort of whether you're still looking at collecting some of that data and sort of what the approach might be there.
Yeah, great points, Andrea. There's a lot there. We are getting the wage information from the quarterly, but as far as is accessible, is that type of information, it will rely also on the appeal process. If there's a dispute later on, it'll go on to explain if there's a dispute between the employer and the employee and it's unresolved, then they have ways to mitigate it with the department. And so we'd be knowing in that situations or people contacting us is where that information will come. Andrew or Jen, do you have anything else to add on that?
Another question, I guess, is there a need to have more regular information about new employees being covered by a plan or not being covered by a plan for the purposes of sort of us understanding portability or, their enrollment into the state plan, or, do you need any additional data points to be able to do that well?
That's a good question, Andrea. I'd have to think about that more and think about that and then come back on Tuesday more of like, do we think we have the data points that we need? We thought so, but now hearing your conversations, I don't know, want to go back and mull that over.
Shannon, while we're on the equivalent plans, there are a couple of questions about how part-time workers qualify or not qualify for the equivalent plans. Can you explain that a little bit for our audience?
Sure. The equivalent plans, just like the state plan, need to cover all employees, full-time, part-time, or replacement workers. So even if an individual is working part-time, as long as they meet the requirements of the $1,000 earned, that type of information, then they also are qualified for the paid family medical leave.
Even if they'll be under 25 hours?
Even if they are under 25 hours. There is no hour limits on a requirement for hour limits based on the state plan.
Okay.
And that is also true for equivalent plan.
Okay. And then the one other question I'd like for you to answer before we move on, because it seems timely to answer why we're discussing it, is how would the annual information be reported?
The annual information, there'll be forms that will be created or information that can be submitted through our online portal and also other ways.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. We'll go down to record keeping then, if there's no other discussion on this administrative rule. Okay, so 2240 is record keeping and department review. So if the employer chooses a fully insured equivalent plan, the insurance requirements are that records are kept for 6 years. So we've chosen here in administrative rule to require all equivalent plan employers to keep records for 6 years. The records are provided to the department just upon request. So they just keep it unless we request for something. In a nutshell, that's what that administrative rule says. Questions, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things, because of the way things are changing in terms of how records are kept, I think other departments have clarified that, for example, you could have records that are kept just on the cloud and we can get them and give them to you. I think that might be helpful to have some clarity there, just to be clear that they can, in whatever form, I can deliver them to you. I also, again, I'm just not sure why the administrative cost is something that you all would need. We can have another conversation about that later. But then on 1C, the employee leave applications, because any document that I would turn over to the department then becomes a public record. I'm concerned about protecting employees' information here. Is there some way we can sort of have some protection around the employees' personal information that may be on those leave applications in terms of whether or not they become public records?
Yeah, great point. I know I don't have it on the top of my fingertips, Paloma, but it is in statute that we can't disclose that information, and I'll just have to go back and bring it back to you. Because I don't have it off the top of my head, but it is clear that we can't disclose that information for public record purposes.
I think it would be helpful if the rules here referenced that,
Okay.
that statute and that rule. I've gotten this question a few times.
Okay.
And I think it's concerning to some people, particularly insurers who would normally not be in the business. They would not give you a sort of release private information like this. So.
And that's a good point, Paloma. I know that there's been some discussion about that back and forth. And so having you weigh in on what the preference is definitely will help PFMLI decide what route to go. So thank you for that.
I have one more here on D. I think some examples here might be helpful. Something that's more specific. Like because it's sort of a catch-all other records. If we could clarify what we mean when we say that, of the types of records you may be asking about, I think that would be helpful for folks looking at this.
Yeah, to me, it would be, employee A took this they took family leave, and this is the total amount of benefits that were paid to them. This is the total amount that was denied and the reason for the denial, that type of information.
Because that seems like it would fall under C. So D.
To me, C is C will have to be updated where you are at in the process. So for example, with employee A, where we just received the application, that's where we're at now. They're on leave, and then the next one is it was approved or denied. So are they pending? Is it approved? Is it denied? So to me, that is different than D.
So I think I might say just like something like the status of any, somehow like the final status of any leave requests or something.
Okay, thanks, that's helpful. Alrighty, moving on then. For the rule on solvency documentation, deposit bond, and letter of credit. So if an employer has an employer administered equivalent plan, the employer must provide to the department a deposit bond or an irrevocable letter of credit issued by an insured institution to make sure the employer has enough funds to pay for an equivalent plan. The department and the paid family medical leave fund need this reassurance, as the state is liable to pay the paid family and medical leave benefits if the equivalent plan employer cannot. So Andrea, I think this kind of addresses your concern earlier.
This seems a little excessive to me as an employer. I mean, that's a sort of, you need to have a certification that it can be fully funded. But often, I don't know why you would need something quite so intense, and certainly not a deposit. Or you can I can provide you with something else, but this seems a little excessive to me in terms of employers that are likely to do the equivalent plan, and particularly those that are likely to go the self-insured route.
Thanks, Paloma, for your feedback. Again, if you have examples and stuff that you can, send to us, that would be great.
Sure.
Other items, yeah.
I'm just going to echo what Paloma said as well. This does seem really excessive.
Thank you both. Okay, the next rule, 2400, disputes between an equivalent plan employer and employee and request for hearings. So the statute, specifically ORS 657B 420, requires the department to provide a dispute resolution process to assist in resolving disputes between employers and employees. We're still researching this further if we have the authority to use the Office of Administrative Hearings to assist with the dispute resolution process, but we welcome any of your guys' feedback you have on this administrative rule as drafted. The rule says the employee must provide to the employer a request for a dispute within 20 days of the adjustment, and the employee and employer must try and resolve the dispute within 20 days of the employer receiving the dispute. If the employee and employer are unable to resolve the dispute, the employee may appeal to the Office of Administrative Hearings within 20 days of the issuance of the employer's determination letter. This 20-day requirement aligns with the state appeal process and also doesn't drag the appeal process on forever to help the employee get a resolution as quickly as possible. So that is our thoughts on the hearing process for an employer and employee. Thoughts?
I would like the notice to go to the employer and the insurer if there is an insurance company involved.
Good point. Sorry, I'm ready. Okay. Other thoughts on this? Like I said, we're still looking to see if there's authority for us to use the Office of Administrative Hearings. Otherwise, it will be internal appeal process first before it goes to Office of Administrative Hearings. And we'll come back to you guys on that if that changes. But as of right now, we're planning on using the Office of Administrative Hearings. Next rule 2450, which is a termination by the department. The department can terminate an employer's equivalent plan for misuse of the employee contributions they are collecting, for failure to follow the approved equivalent plan, for failure to follow the equal to or greater than state requirements, or if the department thinks the employer is at risk of not being able to pay the benefits. If the department thinks there are grounds for termination, we'll send a letter to the employer with the termination date. The employer needs to notify all employees within 10 days of the date on the notice of termination sent by the department. This 10 days is different than the previous draft rule. The previous draft rule had 5 days of the termination, so I just want to point that out. Upon termination, the employer must provide the department a list of all eligible employees with pending and current weekly benefits, the amount of leave taken, and the reason for the leave. Here's another change from the previous drafted rule based on feedback received, that if employee is receiving benefits from an equivalent plan, the employer should continue to pay the benefits for the remainder of the employee's leave. When terminated, the employer needs to give the department any remaining amount they have collected from the employees for the plan. And when the termination date occurs, from that date on, the employer needs to start participating in the state plan and filing and paying on the combined quarterly payroll report. If a business's equivalent plan is terminated, they can't reapply for an equivalent plan for the next 3 years. That's in summary the termination process by the department. Thoughts, questions, comments?
I have a couple thoughts, but I did also want to reference a question in the Q&A from the previous section about how we're going to notify employees about the dispute process. And that felt important to ensure we discuss. But about this section, I would say a few things. And one is, I'm not sure why the language is so permissive at the top, because the statute says shall terminate, not may terminate. And so I think that needs to change. And then wondering if after paragraph 2, where we're kind of talking about the agents, the department's notice for termination, if we could add a timeline that the agency would adhere to and sort of the steps to terminating previously approved equivalent plans. So that was another idea. And then in paragraph 4, you used to have that there would be notice within 5 days to employees, and now it says 10. And wondering if we can maybe have a requirement that employers notify employees both of a pending termination following when the employer receives the letter of intent to terminate, and then the actual termination. So there's more notice.
Good. So you're saying give a notice when they first get the letter, and then if it really is going to happen, then give a second notice.
Yes.
I agree with that. Seems like for all the reasons, employees should know and have transparency in what's happening with their benefits or potentially happening.
Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud. The first, if they give notice the first letter, that might not happen. And so then would that create confusion? I'm just thinking out loud again. Would that create confusion to the employee of, oh, it didn't, they aren't going to they're still staying with the equivalent plan. They're not going to the state plan. So that's where my mind is going right now.
I just want them to have as much notice as possible that there might be a change to their benefit. And maybe the requirement is that there's a follow-up, whether it's terminated or not, to say it's been terminated or not,
Mm-hmm.
It just feels like, especially for folks with planned, anticipated leaves, that, they need more notice, that they need to file in a different way or, something.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, it could be as simple as something that's like no action required at this time. Further notice will be given when action is needed.
I do
So
think that would make things pretty messy to have a sort of multiple step when the termination may not actually happen.
Why can't that be communicated? It's more frustrating to find out after the fact that your plan has been terminated when you're trying to figure out what your leave is, and or in any sort of insurance thing. So having any sort of full disclosure about what's happening with your benefit, it means that you are able to say, okay, this might happen. What if, and then if this happens, what needs to come next? And then if it doesn't happen, cool, that's off my plate. But it's really chaotic when you have a planned leave or you believe a benefit is in place and you go to use that benefit and it's not there. And all of a sudden, everything that you have planned is if you're taking medical leave, your life is in chaos anyway. And so to have lack of transparency in what's happening with your benefit that you're dependent upon just adds to that.
But if you're currently on leave and you have an equivalent plan, the employer has to cover the rest of your leave from the fact that you already have an open claim. That was an important administrative change we got here, that if you have an open claim, the employer is going to pay the whole amount, even if it's terminated in the middle.
But what if you're planning on a leave, whether it is pregnancy or other planned medical procedure, and you still have to go through steps of figuring out how you use your benefit?
This will be something we'll have to think about, but to me, under 8, that if you already submitted saying you're going to be on pregnancy leave, then that employer would still be employer would pay that, even though they were terminated, because it was submitted already. But again, is something for us to think about. Good points.
Shannon, I just wanted to mention, because I thought it was a really important question. I think it was from you, Andrea, about how the employee would know about how they file a dispute with their employer. And we had anticipated that being part of the written notice, the thing that's on the wall or the thing that's sent to them. And I was looking at the statute, and it does say that it has to include an employee's right to dispute a benefit determination in the manner determined by the director. It doesn't necessarily say that it has to explain how to do that. And so, it could be something that we may need to add to a rule. So we'll definitely take a look at that. And I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
I had some other comments sort of back at the top of this section. Let's go back there. So in 1D, where it says increased risk of inability to pay benefits due to employer insolvency, that feels pretty vague to me. Like, I don't know what you mean by increased risk. Like, who determines the risk? What? That just, we need a little more, that needs to be a little bit tighter.
Thanks, Paloma. Just speaking again off the top of my head, my thoughts would be that, for example, if they're behind on other quarterly, if we start seeing they're behind on other quarterly payments or something along those lines, then it doesn't become an increased risk of not being able to pay the employees if they are paying other payments.
So yeah, I think that's the kind of thing where I would like to see some examples or something where the department would say, we think there's an increased risk.
Okay. Thanks.
And then on 6, I think, again, as we've said, like pending and current benefits need to be paid out by the insurer. And the funds that we have collected sort of thus far while the equivalent plan is in place should be retained by the employer. Any funds that we have collected that would have applied to after the equivalent plan has been terminated should be transferred. But I don't think it makes sense that we should have to transfer what we've already collected for an equivalent plan that was fully in place at the time. Same thing on 7. You've heard me say it before. Same thing on 9, where we would transfer a prorated amount.
Paloma?
Yeah.
Do you have your feedback written down?
I will.
Okay, I want you to give it to us verbally, but so that way the staff has exactly what you're referencing without having to go back to the recording. That would be super duper helpful.
Yes. No, you will also get something in writing from me.
Perfect. Thank you. And that the same thing goes for all RAC members. We really appreciate having it verbally and in writing.
And then on 11, where we talk about successor and interest, that feels like an unnecessarily long time where a successor and interest couldn't apply, because there could be a successor and interest because the previous company didn't have the financial wherewithal, and that the plan was terminated because of that. But the successor and interest does have the financial wherewithal, and sort of putting them in the situation where they can't reapply for 3 years doesn't really make sense to me. So, I mean, you can have companies turn around financially in a very short period of time. I've seen it happen.
Paloma, I think that's a really good point. I think what we meant here was that if the successor in interest terminates, or if there's a termination by the successor in interest, that they can't get another equivalent plan for 3 years. But we clearly need to make this rule more clear. Thank you for pointing that out.
I read it to mean
yes,
that a successor to the previous business couldn't reapply. That doesn't make sense to me.
Thank you for the feedback. Other thoughts? All right, then we'll go on to the next one. Termination by successor in interest. So if you're the successor in interest in a business that had an equivalent plan, you must continue the equivalent plan for the year unless there is a substantial reduction of personnel, which remember we defined up above as 33%, at least 33%. So if you qualify, you can submit a request to terminate within 90 days after becoming the successor in interest. Thoughts, questions, comments?
Shannon,
Yeah.
after you go through the employer withdrawal piece, then before we start on the statement of need for equivalent plans, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break so everybody can get up and wiggle their feet and arms and fingers and give our staff a few minute breaks so that they can keep typing away.
Thanks, Anne. So then the last rule in this 10 rule set is employer withdrawal. So an employer can withdraw from the equivalent plan if the plan has been in effect for at least 1 year. To withdraw, they submit a withdrawal form at least 30 days prior to the effective date of the withdrawal to the department. And if the employer withdraws from the equivalent plan and they still have an employee on leave, they must continue paying the benefits until the leave ends or the total amount of the benefit claim is paid, whichever is first. Again, like the termination, with the withdrawal, the employer needs to send to the department any remaining amount they have collected from the employee for the plan. We previously received feedback from the draft administrative rule. There is a requirement to let the department know about the withdrawal, but no requirement to let the employee know. So we added language to the rule that they need to let the employee know at least 30 days prior to the effective date of the withdrawal. Thoughts, questions, comments on that one?
Same thing on 7. I think that they should be able to retain any contributions that were collected or funds that were used by the employer to pay for the equivalent plan up until the point of withdrawal, at which point any funds that would be after withdrawal would be remitted.
Thanks, Paloma.
Okay.
Others, thoughts?
Okay.
All right.
Not seeing any more comments or suggestions, I'm gonna ask Dean to put everybody on mute and give us a 10-minute break. So we'll be back here at 10:21. And then just as a reminder to all of our public members that are attending and watching, we have been capturing your comments in the questions and answer section. If you have not gotten an answer yet, it's because we're saving them for the public comment period so that we can have some robust discussion and feedback all at the same time. But we want to get through the rule language and then the statements of need so that we can have adequate time for discussion at the end. So with that, we will see everybody back here in 10 minutes and my clock says 10:12. So we'll see you in 10. Okay, time is 10:22, so we'll wait until I know for sure that we have our RAC members back. Hi, Andrea. Did you get the chance to stretch your legs a little bit? Good,
I did.
good. So while we're waiting for everybody to get back, I just want to announce again, and if I haven't already, I apologize. This recording will be on the PFMLI website after the RAC meeting and our technical people do what they need to do to get it onto the website for people to view. The slides will also be on the website. If we do not have an answer for your questions that you're typing in the question and answer section of this Zoom webinar, then we will, we are gathering all of them, even the ones that we are able to answer at this time, so that the staff can evaluate them and then get answers in some way, shape, or form so that everybody has them. Okay, I think we're ready to go. Shannon, off to you again.
All right. Well, if there's no further discussion on the rules at this time, we'll go on to the statement of need for the equivalent plan. So again, just remember the statement of need and fiscal impact are regarding the administrative rules and not what was already required in statute. So it's hard to keep that in mind sometimes. So we can just scroll down on the statement of need, which these can also be found on our website, and then to the RAC members, they were sent to you via email in your packet. This statement of need covers the 10 administrative rules that we just discussed about equivalent plans. But on the bottom of page 2 is the racial equity impact section. Again, keeping in mind that we are answering 2 questions here. Again, what is the racial equity impacts of this particular rules, policy, or decision, and who will benefit from or be burdened by? Are there strategies to mitigate the unintended consequences? So again, what you see on this draft statement is our attempt and adjustment from your first feedback at identifying racial equity impacts and capturing mitigation strategies of unintended consequences. So the Paid Family Medical Leave Division is aware that due to barriers and racial disparities, it is more likely that Black, Indigenous, Latino, Latina, and Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islander, and other people of color-owned businesses may not understand the full breadth of options related to the Paid Family and Medical Leave program, specifically including the option to apply for and manage a Paid Family and Medical Leave equivalent plan instead of using the state Paid Family and Medical Leave plan. Additionally, the awareness of the equivalent plan statute and administrative rules, navigating the equivalent plan application and fee process, as well as the annual renewal process. The Paid Family and Medical Leave Division's goals is to ensure there is an equitable access to those in the process of a business choosing to apply and receive approval for a Paid Family and Medical Leave equivalent plan instead of the state plan. We are working with our technology vendor to ensure that the registration process for businesses is accessible and is available in multiple languages, as well as having a paper process and staff ready to assist in the reporting and ongoing requirements. Again, we'll be creating frequently asked questions, video instructions, equivalent plan guides, and other tools to expand awareness and education, making materials available in multiple languages to mitigate some of these disparities. The division will be conducting focused outreach and engagement activities from now until implementation to marginalized communities. That's just a little feedback for our racial equity impacts section. If you have any thoughts or comments, again, we would welcome any of them.
Shannon, Paloma has her hand up.
Oh, perfect.
And then Andrea's next.
Okay.
So in the part where it said, I think it was in the first part.
Dean, will you scroll up forward, please?
No, this is the paragraph, the one that we're looking at right now. I mean, representing businesses that are owned by Black, Indigenous, Latinx, people of color, I'm not crazy about the phrasing may not understand. I'd prefer something that says, I mean, may not be able to fully utilize all the options, or may face barriers to navigating all of this, but may not understand it. That's uncomfortable for me.
Thanks, Paloma.
Good point, Paloma. Andrea?
I'm just noting in both of these statements that there's a reflection on like BIPOC employers, but not employees. And the various sort of ways in which people need to, like as employees, also be maybe additionally, like we need to be thoughtful about the ways that we're requiring translation of materials, or like whatever other things it is that we might be able to consider as potential racial impact statements on the employee side. And if it would be helpful to suggest some things, I'm happy to try to do that. But I've noticed in both of these that it's really only speaking about employers, which seems strange.
Which is not our intent. So yes, if you can supply us with your suggestions, we will gladly accept them to reference off of. Eva, were you going to say something?
I think that I appreciate both Paloma and Andrea's points. Those are things that I also noticed.
Thank you for that.
All right, moving down then on the fiscal and economic impact section. So at the bottom of page 3, if you're following along, this is where the fiscal and economic impact section is. And because the administrative rule is what requires the fee of the $250 per equivalent plan application, we feel this will create a fiscal impact to the paid family and medical leave fund of approximately $22,500 a year, based on the newest numbers from Washington State. We anticipate to get about 90 applications for equivalent plans per calendar year, again, based on Washington State's newest numbers. That's as much information as we can. We have, Oregon can be completely different than Washington, but we have to go off of something. So small business impact, the cost of compliance section that begins in the bottom of page 3, again, is where we talk about the impact to state agencies and small businesses. And we feel the impact on state agencies, local governments, and other public bodies all depends if they choose to have an equivalent plan instead of a state plan. So we don't know how many, if any, state agencies or local governments will be choosing equivalent plans. Effect on small businesses. Again, Oregon has approximately 126,000 small businesses with fewer than 50 employees and 120,000 with fewer than 25 employees. Since all small businesses are eligible to participate in an equivalent plan, all businesses could be subject to these rules if they choose to participate. Again, based on the participation in Washington State, we expect about 59 of the 90 businesses will be small business employers, and they'll submit an equivalent plan application. This is erring on the side of caution, as we don't know how many of these businesses in Washington were small businesses. Based on our definition of small business, Washington's definition is a little different. So we're assuming all of them in this case are small businesses of the 59. And then if you just keep scrolling to page 4, the reporting and record keeping comes into play when a small business submits an equivalent plan application. And the 6 years they need to keep the records of which the employee took the leave, the duration of the leave, and the benefit amount paid. ORS 657B 210 subsection 11 describes that an equivalent plan employer must maintain all reports, information, and records relating to an approved equivalent plan in the manner established by administrative rule. Federal law requires that all records relevant to insurance benefits provided to employees must be maintained for no less than 6 years. And for employers who purchase an equivalent plan from an insurance company, there is no additional record keeping requirements. So the record keeping requirement impacts only employer administered equivalent plans for that 6-year retention. And then the next question, is there any equipment, supplies, labor, and increased administration from these administrative rules? And depending on how the equivalent plan is administered, remember, they can have a fully insured or an employer administered equivalent plan. That will depend on how much administration it will require for a business to offer an equivalent plan. It also depends on how many employees one has. However, all of it is required by statute if you are going to participate in the equivalent plan. The administrative rule just clarifies what type of information will need to be kept. Again, per the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the professional costs $56.24 per hour, and the amount of hours needs will vary greatly depending again on if you're fully insured versus employer administered. So I don't have a total estimate for that. And if you guys have feedback on that, that would I would welcome any of it for that to have an estimate. And then the next question is, how were small businesses involved in the development of the rules? And we talked about a lot of these topics with you guys at the advisory committee meetings, and at least one of you represents, like Jenny already said, small employers. We also met with 14 members who were appointed by the director on the equivalent plan work group. And the work group met 10 times over the last year to discuss various topics we discussed today. And then the documents we relied upon to help with these drafting these administrative rules, here are just a few: the Paid Family and Medical Leave Statute, the UI administrative rules, Washington State's administrative rules on equivalent plans, the Employer Requirement Income Security Act for regulations on insurance programs, and Department of Consumer Business Services administrative rules and laws around insurance providers. That's in summary what is on our statement of need and fiscal impact for the 10 equivalent plan rules. Do you guys have any comments, suggestions, thoughts on those, on that? All right. Then Anne, I'm going to turn it back to you, and Dean, if you want to put back up the slides.
Okay, so we're going to enter into the public comment period for this meeting, and I just ask for everybody to bear with us here just a little bit as we find attendees in the 115 list of attendees. So when I call your name, if you could help us out and raise your hand, then Dean will be able to find you, because it will bring you up to the top of the list. I'm going to start by calling the names off of our question and answer platform where we've asked you to insert your names. I believe the first person was Elaine, but she had another meeting that she messaged about. So we will ask her question, and then Shannon, you or staff can answer it if we have an answer for it. Otherwise, we will capture the question to answer in an FAQ. So her question is, are these wages used to determine the payroll deduction, taxable wage amount, or what is considered a wage for the purpose of determining the paid family leave benefit payment made to an employee when they apply?
Thanks, Anne. I think she's asking if the paid family medical leave benefits are taxable, or the contribution is before tax or after tax taken out of their check. And we are still waiting for guidance from the Internal Revenue Service on this. So I don't have an answer to that. Okay. If that was her, if I understand her question correctly.
Okay. And if
others have anything to weigh in, they can't, from the RAC members or anybody.
Okay. And if I understood correctly, she was going to watch the recording and then reach out if she needed further information from us. So perfect. We'll mark that one done. And if I butcher your name, I'm really, really sorry. That's not the intent. So is it Dania Ochoa is next? So if you can raise your hand, and then Dean will work his magic. And while they're working on that, the question that was posed here, Shannon, is how can there be no admin cost to small businesses when we are expected to input all the information and apply employees' contributions? That will take time. So if you can answer that, I see Dania's hand is raised. So Dean, if you can promote that person to a panelist, that would be great.
I believe what is being referred to here is the statement of need for the wage definition administrative rule, and where we said there's no cost to administer for small businesses. That is in relation to the administrative rule on the definition of wages. It's not on the overall paid family medical leave program, because that is required by statute. And so we have to we can only look at the cost of our rule and what it imposed on small businesses, not the overall statute. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does a little bit. Sorry, you were cutting out. I think it's my internet connection. So will the answer be in writing anywhere?
Yeah, we can, we'll also put the Q&As on our website at the end. So yeah, not the end of today, but in the near future. I'm sorry, I should make that clear.
Yeah, we have to give our staff time to compilate everything and get it so it's website ready. Did you have any other questions, Dania?
Yeah, just about the part-time rule. I think I was mixing that up though with the FMLA rules where if it was the OFLA rules that it was under 25 hours per week, they wouldn't be included, but this particular program will have, regardless of the hours worked, they would all be included.
Yeah, that is correct. It is confusing because you have OFLA, FMLA, and paid family medical leave, all being a little different. But yes, paid family medical leave, there is no hour limitation. And so there's just the $1,000 threshold.
Okay. And if you don't have any
questions,
if you don't have anything further, we'll go on to the next person.
Thank you. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Dania. We appreciate it. So the next person is Abigail. And while Dean is getting everybody switched over.
Hi, so I can spare you.
Okay.
So I apologize. My phone, of course, just started ringing in the other room.
That's how it works.
Yeah, it's always how it works. My name is Abigail O'Connell, and I am on the legal department. I'm in the legal department of Sun Life, and I just want to put out there that my industry, Sun Life and other insurance companies, and I see many of my colleagues on this call right now, we have been in the leave management business for over a decade. And so we've had so many lessons learned because we administer FMLA and other state leaves for our clients. And so we would love to be able to engage with this team specifically to provide feedback on the rules, even when they're not related to equivalent plans. Like, we've been there and we've had lessons learned, and we think we can probably spare you some hard lessons learned if you are willing to meet with us as an industry. We could host a public call through this forum. We could invite you to a carrier call that we have. But I'm glad we can make this connection today and have these public comments. And I don't want to take my colleagues' time with their questions. I put a couple questions in the chat. I don't think I need any answered today, but I just wanted to put that offer out there. And we've been really successful in other states when we are able to engage with rule makers there. And two recent examples of that are the launch of the New York Paid Family Medical Leave or Paid Family Leave program and the launch of Massachusetts Paid Family Medical Leave. In both those states, we went up and were able to advise on draft regulations before they became final. And we have really good working relationships with your equivalents in those states. So just wanted to put that offer out there to engage with our industry.
Abigail, if you can send I believe I already have your contact information, but just in case, if you can send it to the OED_rules@employee.oregon.gov email address, we would love to meet with you guys.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Abigail. Okay, next is Marissa Mayfield. Marissa, do you want me to read your questions? You have several of them in the question and answer section, or do you want to go ahead and ask your questions and make your comments yourself?
Yes. Hi, and can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm Marissa Mayfield. I'm actually a peer of Abigail. I work for Lincoln Financial Group. I'm a product manager, so typically the counterpart with the legal department, working through a lot of the details of these programs. Most of what I put in the chat today were comments for consideration. Like Abby, I don't need any responses necessarily today, but just important things as you were reading through different aspects of the proposed regs, just some considerations to think about as it relates to the private plans in particular focus around the fully insured programs. So as Abby has offered, our company is a part of the different forums that she mentioned. And so we could certainly take opportunity there to dive into some of those details further. So.
And Marissa, if I could ask the same of you to send your contact information to the OED_rules@employee.oregon.gov email address, then we can make sure that Shannon and staff have that.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Okay, next person is Katerina. And Katerina, I'm going to ask you the same thing. Would you like me to read your questions, or would you like to just submit your comment and ask your questions?
I'll just introduce myself. My name is Katerina Naparco. I'm compliance counsel for Reed Group, and you can go ahead and read my question.
Okay. And just 1 second.
I'll go for it, Anne.
Yeah, it's disappeared off my screen.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This is concerning rule number 471-070-2220, subsection 13, which I would have to pull up. Oh, thanks, Dean. It is unclear what constitutes a completed claim, which starts the 2-week first payment timeline. Recommended clarification as to what would constitute a completed claim, which starts the 2-week timeline, would be appreciated. So sometimes an individual will file or start the process for a claim, but they haven't filled out all the paperwork yet. They just started it. And so that's what a completed claim would be. But I'm going to turn over to Andrew or Jen to see if they have anything else to add.
Sorry, I'm struggling with all the different buttons on Zoom. Jen, do you have any input on that particular question?
Other than it's a good question.
Yeah.
I think the intent is that these people need their money. And so we really would like employers to make every effort to get their benefits to them as quickly as possible. But if it sounds like maybe they would prefer some clarification about a completed claim. I guess we could add something like that to a rule, or maybe explain it better in the equivalent plan guidebook or something.
Thanks, guys.
Do you have any further questions, Katerina?
Just to confirm so that I'm aware, so that the team will discuss potentially adding in additional clarification as to what a completed claim looks like. Because if they started the process, right, not filled out all the paperwork, and that would not necessarily be considered a completed claim. However, if it is started the process, completed the paperwork, sent it to, for example, like Reed Group, a third-party administrator, and then there are follow-up questions, would the clock start when Reed Group or another third-party administrator receives this full packet of information, although there may be questions or further information needed? At what point does that 2-week clock start? Thank you.
That's helpful explanation. Thank you for the example.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Katerina. Next, I have Stephen Parrott has a question about the seasonal workers, and I do believe that we are working on an answer for you. We don't have an answer at the moment, but if you have other questions or comments, we are absolutely happy to hear them. I see Stephen there. Okay. I'm going to assume that Stephen doesn't have any other questions at the moment. Stephen, if you end up having questions beyond this opportunity, you please do send us an email, or if we have time at the end after we get through as many people as we can, we will circle back to you. Thank you. Next is Sherry Sanders. Are you there, Sherry?
The unmute button's down at the bottom. Each, Zoom and Teams are all different, so switching back and forth is difficult sometimes.
Yes, it can be. Okay, Sherry's question is, comment is, I agree with 471-070-2280 seems excessive. How would an insured institution know the financial situation of the employer, excuse me?
So I'd have to go look at the administrative, which one that is. Dean, can you pull it up by chance? I don't have it on my screen.
2280.
Shannon, I'm pretty sure that's the one about solvency requirements.
So if you're full, you choose an insurance company, this rule does not apply. It's for self-insured individuals.
Okay. Thank you. Next, we have Tina Dixon. Tina put in the question and answer. There's a couple of them here, so I will read them, and then we'll see if Tina's still wanting to comment while Dean finds this person. I believe the rules for the state plan indicate benefits would only be paid if contributions received are adequate to cover requested benefits. Would you please address the process of the EQ plan if the EQ plan doesn't have adequate contributions to cover the cost of requested benefits? And then the second comment is, perhaps I don't understand, but it appears the rules say the EQ plan would have to continue to pay benefits for claims already approved or received. And it also says the EQ plan, I'm assuming that's equivalent plans. Okay. Must immediately forward all received contributions to the state. How would the equivalent plan be able to pay for the benefits if they have to send all the contributions to the state?
So thanks for the questions, Tina. My understanding is that they would keep a portion back to cover the benefits that still need to be paid. And then afterwards, after all the benefits are paid, they would transfer the remainder, but they would hold some of it back to help pay for that. So they wouldn't be sending everything right at that moment. And what was the first one? If they don't have adequate contributions to cover the cost of the required benefits, then that is up to the employer to come up with the funds to pay for the benefits. That is part of the choice of deciding if you want to do the equivalent plan or go with the state paid family medical leave plan.
Okay. Thank you. It looks like Tina had to drop off for another meeting. So the recording will be available for answers later. Okay. I believe it's Darius Freeman is next, and there are a couple.
And you don't, I don't need answers right now, and you don't need to read them.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm a peer of Abby and Marissa, and I think you've probably seen my name before. I've submitted comments already to batch one and was part of the equivalent plan work group when that was going. So just mirror what they said about, partnering and working with you, and happy to do so. And we'll continue to submit our comments through email so that you've got those in writing, but happy to discuss anything that comes up and would love to work with you guys as much as we can.
Thank you.
Okay. The next one I have is Rebecca Ford. And while Dean's working on finding Rebecca, Rebecca put in the question and answer. I just wanted to confirm that equivalent plans includes fully insured plans. There was a recent webinar I attended that stated only self-insured would be allowed, but as I understood, the last RAC meeting specified fully insured and self-insured options. Thank you.
Perfect. Rebecca, yeah, there are two types of equivalent plans. There is the fully insured plan, which you would purchase through an insurance company, or there is also the option of a self-insured, which the employer would administer themselves. So there are more than one just option for equivalent plans.
Okay. The next one is Sarah Montgomery.
Hi, sorry. Thank you so much for taking our comments today. I work with Marissa Mayfield and I'm colleagues of Darius and Abby. I think you've seen emails from me before as well, providing comments on prior rule batches. Again, we would appreciate the opportunity to share some of the kind of the process that's worked in Massachusetts and Connecticut with the development of an insured product to sit alongside ASO in the equivalent plan space. So again, thank you very much for your willingness to engage with us. I will send my information again after this and look forward to working with you all as we still build out this process and into the benefits rules in batch 3.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Okay. And then we have 2 more people that are signed up at the moment. One is Joanne. Is it Lehman?
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Sorry if I missed something. This is a lot to absorb and to understand.
Yes.
I don't think I heard anything, and maybe this has been considered, maybe you've covered it, so forgive me if you have. If you talked about it's all part-time and full-time employees. What I haven't heard anything about is if you have an employee that's working for another employer and they're only working for you 1 to under 20 hours, but yet they're working more for another employer, who is responsible for contributing, or do you both contribute? I mean, I don't think I've heard anything, and I was just curious.
That's a great question.
Yeah, great question. So it depends. If one employer is an equivalent plan and one is a state plan, there's different scenarios where both employers are equivalent plans, but both of you are ultimately responsible for collecting those contributions. And then the paying of the benefits will be a further discussion. I'm going to turn over to Andrew and Jen.
Thank you. We are considering the way simultaneous coverage situations are going to be addressed and handled. There is language in the statute that refers to how those situations will be addressed, and there will be ongoing conversations on our end to really figure out how to get those the guidelines and process to follow for those in the actual rules coming soon. We have a little bit more policy work to do around how exactly that's going to work, but it is something that we are discussing currently.
Okay. Joanne, do you have any further comments or follow-up questions?
I did in the middle of that, and it just went blank. Sorry, that happens now. I was trying to think about the fact that, it's an equity question, and that is, if you do consider both employers to contribute, it would almost seem like that employee would have more of a benefit than another employee who is in just has us as their employer. So is there it almost feels like that person would get more benefit, because if you're reporting, and I'm trying to think of this, wrap my head around the whole thing, because you're talking wages. So how would you consider wages? So if an employee is working both and both employers are submitting wages, and I think this would be in more of a self-insured maybe. I don't know whether a paid benefits for this or self-insured would make a difference, but is there going to be a little bit of a equity issue from one employee to the other? Does that make sense?
Yeah. As far as contribution goes, the contribution is paid on the wages earned for from each employer up to $132,900. And so if you're working from employer A and you made $20,000, that employer A would collect paid family medical leave off of that $20,000. And then if you're working for employer B and make $70,000, that employer would also collect off of the $70,000. As far as benefits goes, your benefit calculation is on your total for a state plan. It's on your total amount paid that you're paid in wages from all employers. So again, like Andrew said, we're still working through the policy of how it would work if we have one employer as an equivalent plan and another employer as a state plan, how that benefit calculation and payment would work. We're still in the policy development for that and don't unfortunately have an answer for you at this time on how that would work.
Thank you. I appreciate your explanation, and I will look for continued communications about this. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, we have one person that has to leave here in 2 minutes, so I'm going to jump just past John and go to Terry Butler, if Terry's still available, and then we'll come back to John. Give Dean just a second.
It looks like she jumped off, Ann.
Okay. That's okay. I'll go ahead and read the two comments. So one is almost all EMTs and paramedics work part-time for multiple agencies. So it would be good to understand who is responsible. Also, how would we then get the information from all other employers? This would cause us a lot of time to get that information from each employee. The other comment that Terry submitted was, I just would like to have you consider and take into account for the policies. Thank you.
The last comment, I don't know what it was referring to, but the first comment or question about the EMTs and paramedics working part-time for multiple agencies and who's responsible. Again, each employer is responsible for collecting the contributions for the wages that they pay that employee. So then this question then goes into the benefits of how it's paid. And again, we're still working on that policy for simultaneous coverage with if you have an equivalent plan and a state plan or two equivalent plan employers that you're working for. The state plan, again, the benefits are being paid off of all wages earned from all employers. And so we're still working out how that simultaneous coverage will work with different scenarios.
Okay, thank you. John Barrett. John, I can either read your question for you or you can go ahead and ask it.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
So I always like to ask this when these different new state PFMLI laws come into, because as you know, a lot of them have been coming in lately at various states. We're a state public university in California, and I always like to ask, does it apply to state governmental entities as an employer? Is there any exception, or does this apply to all employers regardless of your entity type?
Thanks, John. Yeah, the paid family medical leave applies to all employers except tribal government employers. They can elect in to participate in the state plan, and then federal employers. They are not part of the paid family medical leave program for Oregon, but all other employers are. So state and local government entities would be included.
Okay, and then we would still have the same opportunity potentially to submit a alternative plan for consideration.
Correct. Yeah.
Under the same rules.
Yeah, state and local government entities can participate and choose to do an equivalent plan instead of participating in the state plan.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Next, we have Gina Metlife.
Hello, my name is Gina Rutledge from MetLife. I too am in that partnership with Abby and all the insurance carriers willing to help. One thing about the Oregon is that 132,900, when your state law was passed, that was actually the Social Security wage cap. And we know that it was written in as a dollar, not something that would evolve year over year. So we didn't know if you were considering looking at that particular wage cap in addition to what would happen as things grow. Because this next year, you know, it's going to be, was it 147? And so the Social Security wage cap definitely goes up every year.
Yeah, Gina, when it was, you're right, when it was put in statute, that 132.9 did match the Social Security amount. However, the statute doesn't have us adjust it for inflation until 2024. Sorry, my mind was going, what year? 2024 will be the first year that that will get adjusted for. And so when we start in 2023, it will be the 132.9. And then it will be adjusted after that. So it won't directly align with the Social Security wage cap.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gina. Next we have, is it Brycey? I apologize if I got that wrong.
No problem, it's Brycey. Hi, and mine's a little off kilter here, but I'm just wondering if you can tell us anything about this, the progress of determining the premium rate for our first round once this program goes live, just because I am currently working on modeling the financial impacts of Oregon PFMLI for a lot of different organizations, and the premium rate is really important for that, but it's also crucial in helping employers understand if they can support an equivalent plan or if it pencils out for them.
Yeah, great question. So by administrative rule, we have until November 15th of 2022 to announce that. That is the latest date. However, we would like to get that out as quickly as possible. I don't have a deadline for you though, when that was going to happen. For if it will be November of 2022 or sooner, but we want to try and get it out as quickly as possible, but just trying to still give time for our economists to analyze of how much income collection from the contributions she thinks we'll receive versus benefit payouts to help determine that rate, among other stuff goes into the calculation. But and we do understand that it will be a factor for employers though.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. We do have one other, we did answer it, but I do want to bring it up because I think it's a good thing to talk about while we have everybody in the same platform. Lori Robinette says, I am new to gathering information on PFMLI. I have the information that coincides with this webinar. What is the easiest way to find more information regarding timeline for implementation of either equivalent plans or opting into the state plan?
I'm trying to find it so I could digest everything that was asked.
You're trying to find her question?
Yeah.
Go to the answered tab.
Yeah.
Because Andrew gave her the link to the website, which is exactly what he was supposed to do. So if you scroll down and find, it's an orange box towards the bottom. Keep scrolling. I can see you scrolling.
Sorry. Yeah, so finding out more information on our website, as well as signing up for the newsletter, I would be another great avenue to find out information about paid family medical leave. as well as continuing to attend our discussions here with the Rulemaking Advisory Committee or the public hearing, any of those ways. But as far, we will have stuff up on it, equivalent plans and opting out of the state plan as it is next year, as it gets closer in September, but we'll hope to have it out sooner than that. But there will be more information available, but continue to follow our website.
Thank you for that, Shannon. Okay, I don't have any more questions in the Q&A section. I do see that Marissa still has her hand raised and Lori has her hand raised as well. Looks like, never mind. I guess we don't. So if we don't have anybody else that would like to provide comment or ask any questions, then I'm going to turn it back over to the RAC members to make sure that we don't need further conversation today. And if we don't, then it looks like we may be finished early today.
Then if Dean wants to pull up slide 14. But I'll pause here for a second while he's pulling that up to see if the RAC members have any additional comments, questions, thoughts, anything. We have several follow-up items that we can follow up on Tuesday about at the next RAC meeting, but is there anything else that you would like to make sure we address, that type of information?
Eva has her hand raised.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Thank you. I guess I have a question about additional meetings with some of the people that have requested an additional meeting, and not to call out any specific people or groups, but it's my understanding that we've had a very public process from the legislative work group where we had a wide range of participants and all the various small group participants, and the RAC process is exactly for giving the kind of feedback that we're all giving right now and through the written. And so I just want to make sure that if there are additional meetings, that they are open to the public for like lessons learned or any additional feedback that people may have, because it's more about equal opportunity and not necessarily having conversations about the proposed rules that we should all be a part of, I guess.
Thanks, Eva.
Okay, Shannon, we do have one in the question and answer section from Allie. And Allie, I can either read it or you can ask it yourself.
Oh, sure. It's just more of a commentary that is certainly understood, related to, contributions and equivalent plans. As previously heard, I know you're working to have that prior to November of 2022, just as lessons learned from other states, especially when you're dealing with, not only large employers, but small employers. That factors into whether or not the feasibility of a self-insured, insured, or a state plan, and then giving them ample time to be able to develop those plans and have them approved should they determine that they'd like to move forward with a private plan. And when we look at a November timeline, that greatly reduces an employer's opportunity to do that prior to contributions starting January 1st. So I just wanted to be mindful of that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Allie. Okay.
Other comments, thoughts for today? All
Any
right.
RAC members have anything else?
All right, just as a reminder, that we are, when we proceed with the formal rulemaking, we'll be asking for public comments, and there'll be a public hearing scheduled. And on this slide, the public hearings are going to be scheduled For batch 2 administrative rules that we just talked about today on February 23rd at 3 to 5 p.m. and then February 28th from 9 to 11 a.m. These rules will be published in the Oregon Bulletin February 1st. Again, but we'll be taking all the comments and feedback that we received today and at our next RAC meeting on next Tuesday to factor in all comments there, so they won't look the same as they do right now, I guess is my point. These rules right now are just drafts, and they'll continue to be drafts going through the whole formal rulemaking process. And then also, we don't want to forget about the important dates for the batch 1 administrative rules that we have going on right now, which just a reminder, for batch 1, rules consist of wage definitions, paid family medical leave contributions, self-employed, small employer assistant grants, and outreach rule. And that next public hearing will be Thursday, December 9th from 4 to 6 p.m. If you need to receive, we need to receive all public comments from the batch 1 administrative rules by 5 p.m. on December 20th, if you'd like your comment to be considered in the formal rulemaking process. And on the next slide, we will talks about where to send those public comments or where to find those to sign up for the meetings. So the OED rules webpage is where you can find the batch 1 administrative rules. Also, that's where you can sign up for the public hearing next Thursday. And then you can submit your written feedback as well on the batch 1 administrative rules to the OED_rules at employee.oregon.gov. And also that's where you can submit your batch 2 feedback today from today's discussion. We would like, again, like we said, would love to receive it in writing by December 8th. So please send that to us to incorporate it before the feedback before it goes into the formal rulemaking process. And our paid family medical leave webpage is where you can find additional information, sign up for our newsletter, that type of information, that type of thing. Questions, comments? Otherwise, I thank you guys all for attending today, especially the RAC members for carving out this time. And then we will see you on Tuesday then.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for your work and for helping me fix my calendar's mess up.
Hey, it's our pleasure to get you where you need to go.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Bye.